about instead of
Everyone. Welcome to Bill's April Building Tenant Power Workshop, asserting your civil rights. Um, um, I am going to start us off with a land acknowledgement. We are on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. I would like to recognize that we are occupying the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. As we do this important work on these lands, we understand that our collective liberation cannot happen without Indigenous sovereignty. We encourage each of you to sign the petition for federal recognition of the Duwamish tribe, and if you're able, visit the Longhouse and pay rent to the Duwamish. You can learn more from Real Rent Duwamish. My name is Kate Rubin. I am the organizing director of Be Seattle. I am joined tonight by my co-director, Tanya Moore, and our guest speakers from the City of Seattle Office for Civil Rights, Andrea Brodigan and Ryan Driscoll. So I want to share their contact information for the Seattle Office for Civil Rights is included in our resource guide, which we'll drop in the chat. The resource guide also contains contact information for the Renting in Seattle Helpline, the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections, also known as SDCI. They're responsible for enforcing many of the landlord-tenant laws. And there's also a bunch of other organizations that provide services to renters. We encourage each of you to get more involved with Be Seattle. We're seeking table volunteers, flyer friends, and people interested in developing their skills as part of a tenant leadership team. We host 2 renter councils every month, the Elder Renter Council, which centers renters age 55 plus, and the Seattle Renter Organizing Council. These councils were created for renters to work together to strategize and fight for renter protections that they feel are important to their communities, to give and receive peer-to-peer support for folks organizing in their building, to grow renter power and build community. And we will drop the links for the email lists in the chat. And so before we get started, I also just wanted to let everyone know, you probably saw that we are recording this workshop, and we will be uploading it to our YouTube page. So please keep your privacy in mind if you're going to share something private. You are welcome to turn your camera off, to change your name. To do that, just right click on your name under participants, and you can change it that way. Just remember that this could be public, and to guard your own privacy. And then as far as the norms go, please feel free to use the chat and raise your hand if you would like to unmute to ask a question. Otherwise, please stay muted, except for the community discussion portion, so our hosts can talk. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to our lovely operations director, Tanya Moore, to share some events.
All right, good evening, everyone. So here are some announcements. Tomorrow, Thursday, April 25th, 2 p.m. at City Hall, there's a meeting of the Governance, Accountability, and Economic Development Committee. They're going to be discussing overturning the ordinance that set minimum pay requirements for app-based workers. Workers' rights advocates, including Working Washington and the Washington Community Action Network, calling for community support to show the Seattle City Council that we want all workers to have a minimum wage. Thursday, April 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. tomorrow as well at the Seattle Central Library, Level 8. Real Change News is partnering with the Seattle Public Library to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Real Change's Portrait Project with a new exhibit, Stories from the Streets, Close with Real Change. For the last decade, artists from around the state have contributed their talents to creating portraits of real change vendors. These portraits have been on display in several locations, including Seattle City Hall and the UW. Now we're bringing them to the Central Library downtown. They're unveiling a dozen new vendor portraits by local artists as part of this exhibit. In the city where folks experiencing poverty and homelessness are all too often ignored, dehumanized, and shamed, we invite you to break down these barriers and get to know real change vendors, past and present. Free refreshments are provided and everyone is welcome. On Tuesday, April 30th, 12 to 1:30 p.m., there's a community briefing, advocacy for unhoused Washington residents. The ACLU of Washington, Northwest Justice Project, and Seattle King County Coalition on Homelessness are inviting community partners and advocates to a session discussing their actions and advocacy for unhoused community members in Washington state. The session will cover legal aspects, including ongoing cases like Grants Pass versus Gloria Johnson, Kitcheon versus City of Seattle, and Hale versus City of Burien, and will feature insights from individuals with direct experience dealing with homeless-related laws. Presenters will share ways individuals and organizations can fight to push back against cruel and inhumane laws and advocate for positive and effective public responses to help people gain stability, safety, and dignity all humans need, want, and deserve. And links for these things will be put in the chat. Thursday, May 2nd, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and People Awareness and Action at 9600 College Way North, CC 1161. Urban Native Education Alliance is having an evening of learning, discussion, and healing together. There will be dinner, arts and crafts, and women warrior song. Wednesday, May 8th, from 3 to 4:45 p.m. online via Zoom. Solid Ground
We've lost the sound from you.
Can you hear me?
Can you check your sound?
I could hear you the whole time.
I can't. I'm sorry.
I can
Okay,
hear
I'll come back. I'll leave and come back in. Sorry.
I was gonna say I can hear.
Okay, everybody can hear?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Where was I? Wednesday, May 8th. Sorry, and all of that, I switched the thing. Wednesday, May 8th, from 3 to 4:45 p.m. online via Zoom. Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, Mold and Your Rights. Mold is a serious problem in the Pacific Northwest, and in this webinar, you'll find out why. Plus, how to treat and prevent it. You'll learn how to recognize when a house has mold problems, the owner's responsibility to solve those problems, and what you should do as a tenant, and what you can do if your landlord doesn't fix the problem. Thursday, May 9th, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at El Centro de la Raza, room 311, which is the Digital Literacy Lab, or online via Zoom, the Seattle Renter Organizing Council meeting. Join us for the May Seattle Renter Organizing Council meeting and learn how you can show up for the renters of Seattle. Come help us advocate, organize, and educate. Wednesday, May 15th, from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. in person at El Centro de la Raza, room 311, or online via Zoom, the Elder Renter Council meeting. This is a meeting where renters 55 and up can meet to discuss things that are important to them, and we often have educational workshops. Wednesday, May 22nd, from 6 to 8 p.m. online via Zoom, Be Seattle's May Building Tenant Power Workshop, amplifying young voices for housing justice. As the housing and homeless crisis worsens, what does the future look like for younger people? How can we ensure better outcomes for generations to come? Let's talk about it. We're excited to have Jaleesa Sanchez from Choose 180 and Jasmine Smith from the Washington Bus joining us as guest speakers. Jaleesa will share insights on why transformative justice is essential in the fight for housing justice. And Jasmine will speak to the importance of younger voices in political advocacy. Wednesday, May 22nd, from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m., online via Zoom, Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, What to Look For as a Senior Renter, Part 1. Tuesday, May 28th, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m., online via Zoom, is the WRAP King County Regional Call. The aim of the Resident Action Project is to build a statewide network of people who are directly impacted by housing and homelessness issues, who are leading the charge for social change. Gain advocacy, organizing, and policy skills by attending this monthly Zoom meeting on the fourth Tuesday of every month at 5:30. And with that, I'm going to hand it back, or I guess I'm doing the introduction of the speakers. Our amazing speakers tonight are from the City of Seattle Office of Civil Rights. Andrea Brodigan, she, her, has honed her flexible approach to resolving conflicts over 20 years in the field. Andrea accounts for each party's unique needs, empowering them to make their own decisions. Her work includes mediating, coaching, community engagement, and skill building. Ryan Driscoll, he, him, is the community engagement specialist for the Office of Civil Rights and a longtime Seattle renter. He enjoys working at the intersection of community and government to make sure that people are getting the support and the protection they need to thrive. And I was behind on the thing, so now you can see their beautiful pictures. And it is all y'all's.
You're muted, Andrea.
Of course I am. Hello, good evening, everyone. It's great to have this time to get together and talk with you all. Our thanks to V Seattle for the invitation and the opportunity. I'm glad to be here with my colleague Ryan to talk about how to talk to your landlord. As mentioned, I'm a mediator for the Office for Civil Rights and have been doing this kind of work in a lot of different settings for a number of years. So that's a little bit of me. I too am a renter in Seattle, and we're going to talk more about that later. So wait for that piece. Ryan, did you want to say any little bit more before we get into how to talk to your landlord?
No, just to reinforce, we appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you all, and we're looking forward to both sharing some ideas on how you can navigate complicated conversations, as well as to hearing from you all on ways that our office can better support you as renters when issues do come up.
Exactly. All right. So through the magic of technology, I am going to share my screen, hopefully. May my controls back. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. All right. Ta-da. How's that looking for everybody? Yeah, great. All right.
It
So-
looks great, but we can see like your notes. I didn't know if you wanted that in like the previews with the next slide.
No, we don't really, but that's not what I asked it to do. That's what it does. Oh, it doesn't like that one. So Ryan will tell you that today's agenda is talk a little bit about how to have some difficult conversations and generally just some basic communication skills. that you can use to maintain, develop, and keep going with the relationship with your landlord. Let me see if I can pull the one that is supposed to operate more appropriately. Okay. It's the one. One thing that we learn in the providing of services to the public in this time of everything online is patience. So I appreciate that. Okay. This should go just to that.
Andrew, would it be easier if I just share and then you can just follow
Yeah,
along?
I've got a little, some kind of glitch over here on this side. It's not making a lot of sense.
Is everyone seeing this without notes this time? Excellent. Okay.
I pulled something over to my desktop earlier and it seems to have a conflict. All right, you live and we learn. We go ahead. All right. So we want to understand some communication skills, right? And also get a sense of how it is that we respond to conflict, because that drives how effective our communication is. We're hoping that you can take away some skills from this that you can use throughout your tenancy. Okay. And then a little bit later, we're going to go over what the city services available to tenants are. And then we're going to end with an opportunity to just have a conversation about how you've interacted with the Office for Civil Rights before, and what we might be able to do to make that easier, more straightforward, and really meet more of your needs. Okay. So we kind of take communication for granted. What we think happens when we communicate is pretty easy, right? We say something, right? We have in our mind what it's going to mean. We send that message out when we speak to someone. We think it gets taken in and that it gets understood, right? What happens more often than not is different, right? In this little simple pattern of talking and listening, more often than not, we find that our messages are not understood. The reason for that is because we all come at communication with an already formed set of filters, right? It's our life experiences, it's our family that we grew up in, it's the context that we're talking to somebody in, it's our worldview, it's sort of everything that makes us us, colors how we take in information and understand it. So everything that I understand and the way that I understand it is going to be different, perhaps, than the way that Ryan understands it or anyone else understands it. So it's in this middle point in sending and receiving messages based on how we understand the world that can lead to conflict, right? Misunderstanding. Right? Most of the time, what happens when things are going well, right? We feel understood, we feel respected, we feel valued. And that's the point of good communication. That's pretty much what everybody wants, is to feel heard, understood, respected, and valued. When communication breaks down because of those filters, because we tend to misunderstand each other more than we do understand each other, right? We lose some trust, right? We no longer believe that this person that we're speaking to has good intentions, or we make all kinds of subliminal judgments about what we think about that person. So when trust gets lost as a result of communication breaking down, we start to question their motives. Like, why are they talking to me this way? What do they really mean? What's really up with them when they speak to me this way? The more often that pattern gets repeated, just can't seem to get our messages across and feel heard, understood, and respected, the more that our emotions get built up and our stress levels tend to rise. Right? We feel this in our body more often than not, rather than thinking about it consciously in our mind about what's going on. Right? So you can feel that tension start to build as communication breaks down. When our bodies are responding this way to communication that's not going well, right, our brains literally do go into a different mode, right, that prepares us to that flight or flee response. We either want to fight our way out of a dangerous situation, starting to feel unsafe, having this communication, it's starting to feel like things are not going to go my way. We're getting more and more tense, and our brains do prepare us to either fight or run. That's a response that all of us share. Sometimes it's really kind of subtle and it doesn't really get in the way of things, but the more conflict starts to come up, the more communication starts to break down, the more likely those kind of feelings and responses are going to be heightened. So what happens after this pattern just keeps going on and we're feeling this build and our brains are telling us to either fight it out or they're telling us to just run away? We stop listening, right? It's a natural response. People don't like to be in uncomfortable situations, right? So we stop listening to each other and we start reacting instead. Okay? That's not a great situation to be in, really, in any interpersonal relationship. But there are some things that you can do about that, right? And so these are, again, just very basic communication skills, and we've kind of taken some time to try and put them into the context of talking with your landlord. Okay, so here are some things you can do to stop communication from breaking down and to take control of those emotions and those sort of autonomic responses that we have when we start to feel stressed due to the communication not flowing very well. Okay. So in the spirit of Be Seattle, we thought it might be helpful to say, be prepared, be an active listener, be polite, direct, and factual, and be effective in your communication. Okay. So we'll go into a little more detail about what those things mean. So let's say you're walking into a conversation with your landlord. Maybe you need to have your locks changed, or you need to have some clarity about their policy, or you need to have make a request for a repair, or you've got some trouble with your neighbor next door, but you're not really sure how to handle it. Okay? Well, first you need to know what your rights are. That's usually what we lead with when we're talking about landlord-tenant communications. If you go into a conversation prepared with information and you know what your rights are, right, you're not going to feel as disadvantaged or as, prone to want to just end the conversation and run away because you have something to fall back on, right? In the landlord-tenant space, usually what we're talking about is things like knowing what the first in time law is, right? Knowing what questions to ask about that first in time law, knowing things about their policies, knowing things that are terms that are contained in your lease. So you can do some very constructive things on the front end to prepare yourself for a conversation. And of course, we have lots and lots of resources available for people. Mostly renting in Seattle is an excellent way to educate yourself about what your rights are. And then we also, of course, have discrimination questions at seattle.gov where you can ask us. And we'll help, guide you through what might be at issue in your situation. The other way to prepare yourself for, having more effective communication and to prevent those conflicts from bubbling up and becoming destructive is to know yourself. How do you react to conflict? What are your emotions that tend to come up, and how are you going to manage them? And just have all of your information at the ready when you're going to go into a conversation. That's pretty much true for a lot of kinds of relationships that we have: landlord-tenant relationships, business relationships, if you go to buy a car, anything like that. So knowing your rights and knowing yourself are two good ways to start off on the right foot when you want your communication to go well. Okay. This is always fun to look at for me. This is about knowing your responses to conflict. How do you react when things get tense, when communication is breaking down, when you have a serious conversation that you have to have? If we take the time to understand not just what our own filters are, but also how we respond in situations where things can be at odds, it can really help us pick and choose how to respond differently and identify when the person that we're speaking with might be in one of these different zones. So what you see here briefly, right, is the more important the issue is to a person, they're going to behave in ways that are different than if the issue is not very important. And if what they want to do is win, if all they want to do is win and they don't care about the relationship, then you have your classic competition. I win all costs, squash a relationship, I don't care. That's competition, right? What we hope to have happen more often than not is some kind of balance in the relationship where you know that if you react in a way that I'm willing to give a little bit, because I care about the issue and the outcome, I care enough about the relationship that those people that are interacting are going to be more cooperative with one another and lead to better outcomes. Cooperation is going to get you more, and collaboration is going to get you more of what you want than competition or avoiding the conflict altogether, or just throwing up your hands and saying, it's fine, you win. So these are some very common ways in which most people react to conflict. And everybody has one kind of style or reaction that is kind of their dominant one. Right? But it very much makes a difference on who you're talking to, right? Because the relationship that with that person is going to be different than, it's different to talk to your landlord than it is to talk to your spouse. It's different to talk to your mom than it is to talk to your dad sometimes even, right? There's all kinds of ways that we react, but we have a dominant one in face of conflict. Mine tends to be more collaborative, but you set me in front of a backgammon board and it's competition all the way. I'm just going to beat you into the ground, right? Totally different scenario. But I know what my reactions to conflict are. And so this is just to build some awareness about how you might respond, how to identify how someone else might respond, and make some choices about what behavior you would rather see to get more of what you want when you're having a conversation. Okay. Well, that's a little bit about the reactions. Active listening is something that most people are familiar with. Being an active listener is just a basic communication skill that we can all use in every walk of life. Sometimes you hear it referred to as like constructive conversations, intentional listening, proactive listening. Active listening is kind of the catch-all for something that people do when they really want to listen to understand instead of respond. Usually what we do when we listen to someone talking to us, maybe we're doing it right now. A lot of you might be sitting there thinking, oh, I'm crafting up my questions that I'm going to ask the people from the Office for Civil Rights, right? Does that mean that you're listening to understand what I'm saying? Or does it mean that you're listening to respond to what I'm saying? It makes a big difference to be an active listener. And it pretty much just means take a minute, set aside your distractions, get yourself together, prepare yourself to listen. Right? Give someone your attention. You might lean in, you might put your phone down and say, can we take some time to talk about this? Right? Instead of, multitasking like we tend to do, right? Give time and attention to the person that you're speaking to. And when they say something back, you paraphrase what they've said. And you don't just parrot them, right? Repeat what they said. What you want to capture is the content of what they said, but also the emotion behind it, right? And a way that you keep this conversation going so that you can learn more. That's what you're trying to do. You want to understand. So it means you need to keep trying to learn more. Is to ask clarifying questions about what you've heard. Okay? I want to be sure I understand completely. Can you tell me more? Tell me more or help me understand. These are all kinds of prompts that you can give to someone that you're talking with to give you more information, tell them more about how they feel, what they think, what the facts are, any of those kind of things that you're trying to ferret out in having this conversation. Okay? And then what you want to do is make sure you got it right. When you've heard something from someone, you've asked them to give you more detail about it, you want to make sure that you've got it right, right? Summarize what they've said, summarize what you've understood. It sounds like you're really frustrated when your husband doesn't put the toilet paper on the toilet paper roll the correct way. Sort of a classic example of a pet peeve, right? Whoop, got a little distraction there. That's okay. I think we might have lost the screen share. Yeah, there we go. You know, but when you have a conversation with somebody about, you know, sort of what's bothering them, usually what you'll end up finding out is, oh, so when this happens and your husband's not, you know, taking out the trash when when you think he's supposed to, what that says to you is that he's not paying attention to the quality of your home environment. And what you really need is a nice, orderly way of something nice to come home to so you can relax. If that's what's important to you, those are the kinds of things that you want to try and capture and summarize when you are intentionally engaged and listening actively. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? I just want to go ahead and say, if you guys have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll you know, circle back around if you want to. Switch. Feels like Zoom is on the fritz today. It does indeed. Yeah, Kate. Oh, I see some hands too.
No, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is kind of code switching for landlords, and like these are best practices, and it is good to be able to have clear, calm communication with your landlord for the best results. But I also like just really want to acknowledge that that's what it is. And that you don't have to speak landlord in order to have your rights protected. Like, I just want to like point out like best practices and code switching versus like what's actually the law and what they have to do.
Yeah, sure. Tell me more about that.
I mean, there's not a whole lot more to say. It's just that like I know when it comes to people's housing, emotions do bubble up. They really like
Sure.
like it's kind of on the landlord a bit as the person who has control over the housing to be the calm one. And I'm not encouraging anyone to like go start screaming at your landlord, but just like really recognizing that like there is a power imbalance here, and this is just kind of like, you know, those of us who have had to do this a lot know that you get better results this way, but it's a part of like frankly like white supremacy and tone policing and all of that. And like we just acknowledging it, just understanding that and going like, okay, this is a tool that I can put in my toolbox in how to talk to them to get what I want, but this isn't required of me as a tenant to get treated like a human being.
Absolutely not. 100% agree with that. So active listening, as you said, is just a skill, and it maybe is a best practice in light of the business relationship that tenants find themselves in. And it's a very unequal one, right? So active listening doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with what they're saying, nor should you ever change your authentic self in order to appeal to them in some way. That is, you know, never something that's going to lead to, you know, advocacy, you know, being able to assert your rights appropriately is first and foremost, appropriately for you is first and foremost the thing that we want to be able to accomplish whenever we're in an unequal situation, right? Don't give up those rights just in the name of peace or understanding, right? Active listening can be an effective way to say, these are my rights as I understand them. Help me understand what it is you're trying to require of me. so that you have an understanding of the basis sometimes to challenge them, not just to have a conversation, but you also do need to know where they're coming from. And that kind of leads us to the next piece of this. You need to be able to listen actively to understand, not necessarily to agree. But you also have an opportunity when you're having communications with landlords or anyone else when you advance the slide there for me, Ryan. Keep records, right? Because we do know.
I just wanted to note that Jade has a hand raised, and then in the comments, Troy asked a question: how should a tenant interact with a landlord who is simply interested in winning and not interested in building a productive relationship?
I think oftentimes, that's a great question. Oftentimes that's where all of these things work together to help protect yourselves. Interacting with a landlord who's just interested in, taking your money at all costs, being right about everything, and not having, any opportunity to try and resolve things effectively, constructively, or within the bounds of the law for compliance purposes. You need to be able to document, right, so that you can frame a complaint typically before our office or any other agency that has control over those things. So there are definitely appropriate points in time where you find you have to walk away from having those conversations with the landlord or their representatives because you're hitting a brick wall. And you need to seek outside support so that you can get them into compliance and ultimately get your rights protected or a thing accomplished, something fixed, depending on what your scenario that's the struggle that you're having with them, right? So that's where things like, in this kind of a situation where you're not getting anywhere with the landlord, if you have engaged with them long enough to understand what their stance is, and you have documentation of what their stance is, then you're set up better to be able to challenge it and get some corrective action taken. That's the hope. Oftentimes when you have landlords that are just absolutely non-communicative, that's where we find a lot of the work that we do comes into play, because we aren't in an equal position with them to be able to demand that landlords do anything by comparison. And so getting some support from outside agencies to have some action taken, or filing lawsuits, coming to organizations like yours for advocacy, those are all very important steps to be able to take, because we know that it is extraordinarily unbalanced, particularly in this time in this city, because the affordability factors are so bad and the conditions are very difficult to fight against. Let's take a minute and look at see what other questions that we have. I see Jade has a hand raised with having some. Yeah, Jade, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Seattle for hosting this and for your office, for your Office of Civil Rights coming in today. I'm a Shoreline renter at the moment, but I was a Seattle renter for quite a few years and was outpriced, therefore displaced. But a lot of my advocacy work is focused in Seattle. I have a few questions for you. One of them is there a version of this for landlords? Because a lot of this information right here would be fantastic for landlords. To Kate's point, not only is this, it causes, for the majority of folks who end up dealing with, especially, I used to work in legal aid in Seattle King County, so I know far too much about landlord-tenant problems there. But we are disenfranchised, marginalized. It's mostly going to be Black and brown people. It's going to be people who do not speak English as their first language. A lot of the times these tools or these strategies, these tactics that you're speaking on are used, but because of the power imbalance that Kate was speaking to, I really appreciate you bringing that up. Not only is there always a race, or typically a race imbalance there, even if there's not, the power imbalance comes down to capital, right? This is a capitalistic mechanism that therefore forces us to be in competition. We're always in competition with our landlords, whether we like it or not, whether we're besties or not. That's the nature of the relationship that the system has put us in, especially as poor people, especially if you're someone who's got a voucher. That's even more of a significant power imbalance. But then whenever you do add race into it, if there are race, say the tenant is a Black person working with the landlord who's white, that just adds to the power imbalance. It's capitalism, it's white supremacy by way of capitalism. And so my question for you, do you have a version of this for landlords? And then when we are, I appreciate what you just said towards the end there. I feel like you finally said it, like you're acknowledging the power imbalance exists, and that most of your cases when Office of Civil Rights has to step in, it's when those landlords are being most incooperative and just clinging on to that power that they hold. That's when y'all start seeing those more complicated cases. My question is, do you have any advice for us when it gets to that kind of situation, right? Because I think overwhelmingly, at least to the audience that you're speaking to in this moment, a lot of us know our rights. A lot of us come to Be Seattle Tenant Power Workshops. A lot of us go to Solid Ground Tenant Power Workshops or the Tenancy Union XYZ. So we're aware of these tools. We're kind of, at least I know I am as a community member, I'm really kind of searching for that extra when the going gets tough, whenever we do need to reach out to Seattle Office for Civil Rights. What are those tools that maybe y'all use that we could learn and empower ourselves to learn and use, because y'all have such a high caseload, right? And capacity is limited. Those are the things I'm hoping here. And I realize y'all have more to this presentation, so I'll stop talking. Maybe we'll get into that in a little bit, but those are the first questions that I had. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Jade. I appreciate that. So we are in development of something for landlords, right? Because we recognize that they have the upper hand, but that everyone can use communication skills. Landlords, I think in particular, can use communication skills. And I think they also could use just a very realistic view of the impact that they are having on their tenants and society at large when they don't bother to know what it takes to comply and to treat people with the humanity that they deserve in light of the severe shortage, difficulty, all of the things that go into making housing and obtaining and keeping housing so extraordinarily difficult, right? They have I think that most of my experience has been that landlords that find themselves before the Office for Civil Rights, there's one of two kinds. There's one that did not really realize and was not at all following some of the fundamental protections that are in place. And when you tell them what they are, they go, uh-oh. But then there's a whole nother contingent that know, but they also know the loopholes. And they also know how to massage messaging and things like that so that they don't have a problem with compliance later. And so some of these things that we're talking about today, just basic stuff, and I see, or they ignore the laws, right? Because there's so much volume out there, they can't ignore the laws. Right? Most of what happens with bias and discrimination claims is, people just sliding right on through the process because most people don't advocate for themselves, nor do they know that the Office for Civil Rights or other agencies are available to the extent that they have authority to make change and to enforce compliance with those protections. So we're working on the landlord component, and I think it'll have a bit of a different flair for a number of reasons, but definitely trying to focus around the imbalance and how to honor that, do something about that, and not continue to repeat it. That's our hope. So that's that part of your question. And I think we will definitely get into more of the resources and ways that you can engage with the City of Seattle, various departments to seek assistance when things have really broken down. Yeah, and probably just a few minutes, really. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to suggest that when it comes to where we are with this presentation, that just emphasizing that the reason for keeping records kind of goes hand in hand with the struggles that people are having, trying to be treated fairly in compliance with law. Because, you know, there is so much opportunity for misdeeds, misstatements, misunderstandings, to go by the wayside and not get corrected, because people find themselves at a disadvantage when they don't have something in writing, because our system is not designed, right? It is the legal system, and it is not designed to take everybody's verbal complaints, and be able to act on them. And that is kind of getting back to Kate's point, you know, just continuing a white normative system of oppression. So we're hoping that there are ways to break it down, break those barriers down over time. If we could do it in a day, we would. But oftentimes when we have that opportunity in mediation to talk with people one-on-one, sometimes most of the time it's in different rooms, not actually together, because it isn't about liking each other. It's about respecting and honoring a person's circumstance and situation, the consequences of what happened when their rights were not protected, when their rights were not upheld, when people's rights were not honored. And so we have a lot of conversations about how do we change this, not just for you, but for future behavior that landlords might be thinking they can continue to do over and over again. So that's why documentation matters. It's not just because it's good practice. It's because it may well be the thing that helps you have the conversations and get the solutions that you need later. Seeing a few more comments in the chat. Appreciate that. Let's revisit. There's so many awesome comments and questions in the chat. I'm going to advance this slide a little bit, and so we can wrap up this component. Okay. Now, this might also come across as really, we already know this. Be polite, be trick, feel factual, but you would be surprised how many people on both sides of this relationship fail to do that. Oftentimes, you know, it's one of those factors that contribute to breakdown in communications, and also do not put a person in a situation where they're going to get a result that they really wanted, right? Because what they really want, what they're trying to advocate for, an outcome that they're going for, gets lost, right? You can set yourself up much more effectively for an outcome that's advantageous to you with some very basic things, right? Say hello, be polite. Doesn't mean you have to like them. It just means people don't listen to you when you're being yelled at, ultimately. There's a right time for that kind of behavior. But if you're talking about sort of the day-to-day interactions, you know, I say the word lawyer and they leave you alone. Yeah, that could be true too. But if you being direct communication, you're not giving away anything about your position. You're not giving away anything about how you feel about the circumstances, right? And so that can be a strategic choice as well. You're taking the relationship to a professional, more business-oriented level, so that you can navigate it. And ultimately, you will get better results, hopefully. And if you don't, you're still well positioned for your next steps in enforcement. Right. And bear in mind, the mediation program sits in the enforcement division. And so we have a number of different approaches that we take to helping people communicate about what they want to talk about, so they can get the results that they want, whatever those might be. And if you're just navigating that tumultuous rental, you know, say it's your first time out there trying to rent a place, or it's your first time with this new landlord, and the landlord's clueless or something, these kinds of things can help you, hopefully, work more constructively with the landlord instead of letting problems, you know, bubble up or mushroom out into bigger conflicts over time. Okay. And people get really excited, right, when they're trying to rent a place, and it's so competitive, and there's such a disadvantage. particularly now, right? There are more people needing a place than there are places available, and prices are going sky high. So if what you are positioning yourself to do, right, is to be as concise as possible, you're likely going to be better positioned then, or get a better response from landlords who tend to tune out, right? If you give them too much communication, right? Saying something like, I have the best dog in the whole world, this kind of thing. And do you allow nice dogs? You know, you're trying to appeal to them. People do this a lot. They try to appeal to the landlord rather than standing strong in what they know is accurate and just saying it that way. My dog's 30 pounds. Is that your pet policy? It's much easier to get the landlord to respond to than some of the others. And it also seems sometimes counterintuitive to have to pull yourself back because people want to typically be comfortable where they live. And if they have close connections and communication, or, you know, oftentimes in an apartment, right, you're going to see your property people, you know, on the daily, and they have this notion that this is a family sort of environment and isn't this a wonderful little community. Those things might be true, but we also know that it's not really that kind of an experience. It's not a close-knit experience that most people have with their housing providers, right? And so being factual, right, is one strategy to help ease the communication so that you can get results faster. Just taking a quick look. Yeah, right. Okay. I think we should pause here and take a look more at some questions in the chat and or raised hands. I can see now more of the field of people that might have questions. So let me take a look. And Ryan, help me out there, see what you spot.
Yeah, let's see. Sorry, I was in the middle of responding to someone.
Okay,
maybe
great.
Maybe I can just respond to T. T was asking, they had some questions regarding their family's rights. They've got a variety of different issues that are going on, some around damage requests that aren't being responded to, some around the denial of access for reasonable accommodations, and then some around disparate treatment around security guards. And they were just wanting to know, like, what are their rights around these issues? So real quickly, if it, oh, my computer, just a second, let me plug my computer in that I forgot to do. So if it is a repair request that's not being responded to, then that would be the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspection. And so you can reach out to them, and they're the ones who enforce the like repair laws and things like that. You do have a right to have repair requests responded to in a timely manner. And so they're the ones that enforce those particular laws. Around accommodations, that is something that our office can help you with. The way the accommodation process works is as long as you put in a request, and it doesn't have to be a written request, it can just be a verbal request for an accommodation. There should be a response from your landlords in a timely manner. That response doesn't necessarily need to mean you get the exact thing that you ask for, but it should initiate a conversation. And this goes back to Andrea's points about records. If you put that request in and you're not getting any response, then that is something you could reach out to our office around. And then we can start an investigation around that, because it should be starting a conversation with your landlord around that accommodation process until you land on something that is going to work for your disabled family members' needs. Around disparate treatment from security guards, that is also another place where that, you know, it's unacceptable to be treated differently based on any of your protected classes. And so that is another area where our office could look into what's going on and do an investigation on that as well.
I'm seeing a question here too from Jennifer. What happens when SOCR does not enforce compliance by landlords, even when they are repeat offenders of violating city, state, and federal civil rights? Yeah, it's a great question. And Ryan says it depends on what the policy they violated was and what the circumstances, what consequences they face. What happens when you contact the Office for Civil Rights and they do an intake on your circumstances? They will determine whether or not we have jurisdiction to enforce that discrimination law, and possibly leading to an investigation. When we have multiple kinds of complaints about individual landlords or companies, there is a thing called a director's charge, and that can envelop multiple charges against whole segments of a landlord, housing provider, and or sort of a stream of property managers. So there are circumstances where it isn't just an individual complaint. A director's charge is more encompassing of repeat offenses, and ones that are particularly egregious or have been ongoing. There's also sort of a ramp up of penalties that might be imposed by the director for repeat offenses. So, you know, we don't really have I'm not drawing it from recollection, any current director's charges that I could give you an example of. But that is a mechanism for trying to do something to enforce laws for those that are particularly egregious and repetitive. Let's see. Oh. Does SOCR enforce state and federal laws? Yes, and SOCR, the city of Seattle has more protected classes than anywhere in the nation, and those exceed the federal laws. So being positioned here in Seattle gives people a lot more opportunities to advocate for their rights and avenues for protection. Yeah. But we do also enforce the federal law along with that. And does our office work with the Department of Justice in any way?
We don't work with the Department of Justice. We do
Not-
work with the EEOC, so the
Right.
Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, which is a state level body. And so that is when issues that they might investigate are in the city jurisdiction. We work with them because they're way more overloaded than we are. And so we will take cases off of their plate so that they can be investigated appropriately.
Mhm. Yep, that's right. And a follow-up to that too, what happens if SDCI violates our civil rights? There are circumstances where, because we have different jurisdiction, and we're going to turn to this, I think, next. So you have an overview of what the various departments do. If you're not aware already, then it's just a nice refresher. We have circumstances where we might coordinate with SDCI, but our enforcement jurisdictions are different. So there might be a discrimination claim that's handled by our office, and then a compliance issue that's taken up by SDCI, and sometimes they do overlap in who did what when and on what property. And so we might have some collaboration there in trying to resolve the matter, but we don't jointly handle those claims in different jurisdictions. To clarify, SOCR might work together with SDCI. There are occasions where we need to have an exchange with SDCI in order to resolve the discrimination claim. Sometimes it has to do with voluntary agreements, settlement agreements, and other types of things that people agree to do to resolve a problem that is SDCI's jurisdiction, as opposed to the Office for Civil Rights jurisdiction.
And I think a great example of that is the Renting in Seattle website is a collaboration between us and SDCI and the Office of Housing, and kind of it was a space where all of the different city departments that are working on renters' rights got together and pooled all of our information into one space. Because as you all are noting, it's all like different pieces are scattered in different departments, which makes it challenging. And also, I don't know who named the Department of Construction and Inspection, but like, I don't know why anyone would expect that that's where you would go if you have landlord-tenant issues, because it sounds like that's where you go if you want to get a permit to build something, which is also something that they do. So one of the things our office tries really hard with, because a lot of people just they just don't know where to reach out, is our front desk will often screen issues as they're coming in, and as issues come up that aren't something that our office deals with, we'll direct them to the appropriate office. So if you're ever just not quite sure, you can always reach out, and our front desk can help you and say, oh, actually, that would be this particular office. Here's their phone number, or something along those lines, because it's a little silly to expect everyday residents of the city to understand exactly which office enforces each of these things. And as always, Renting in Seattle is also there to help. So that usually has a pretty clear guide of where you should go for which policy.
Yeah. I think it would be a good time then, Ryan, if we just turn to that explanation of what city services are available.
Sure, let me do a screen share.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is based on what you all have shared, this is probably a review for many of you, but just to give, again, a review of what each different office kind of is in charge of. So the Office for Civil Rights, which me and Andrea work for, is protection from discrimination. So if you are discriminated against or there's disparate impact, we do investigations around discrimination taking place in housing, employment, contract law, and for you all, it's mostly in that housing sphere. That also includes particular ordinances for the city, like First in Time, which is our law that says, the first person to fill out and meet all of the criteria of an application is the first person who is offered housing. That is probably one of the ordinances that we get some of the most complaints around landlords not following. We are also the place to go if reasonable accommodations are not being made. So as we talked about, reasonable accommodations are a dialogue. It starts a conversation around what accommodations are going to allow someone to have their needs met in their housing. And if that process is not happening, then we are the office that you can come to get support. Some other ones to know a source of income. For example, if you are getting income through SSDI, if you are getting income through sources that landlords, as long as it's regular income, landlords are not allowed to discriminate against where your income is coming from. And then the fair chance housing laws, which are if you have a criminal record. We have particular protections in Seattle around landlords not being able to take disparate impacts, or I'm sorry, negative impacts against you just because you have a criminal record. And there are little exceptions around there around particular laws that that federal jurisdictions have control over. For example, if you're in federal housing, there are certain laws that kind of come into play there. But in general, if you have a criminal record, the city recognized that people were getting screened all the time, or landlords would put up posters that would say, like, if you have a criminal record, don't even bother applying. And that is not allowed in the city anymore. So that's our office. The Department of Construction and Inspection, which really needs a new name, is all about local landlord tenant laws. So if you have a repair request that's not being met, if if your housing is inhabitable for from an accident that happens or things along those lines, code inspections, if something's not up to code, maintenance problems. They're also the ones who run the tenant relocation assistance program, and they manage the Renting in Seattle hotline, which is a phone number that you can call that is staffed with people who are experts on landlord-tenant law and can help to answer your questions. Another office is the Office of Housing, which is where you think you might go if you have questions around housing. Mostly what the Office of Housing does is fund the construction of housing. And so they fund most of our affordable housing projects in the city, or they help to fund a lot of those projects are money from a lot of different pots coming together. And they also have an affordable housing search tool. So if you are looking for affordable housing, they are the city resource that can help you find particular opportunities out there. And then I throw the Department of Neighborhoods on here just to note that there is the Seattle Renters Commission, which I'm sure you all are familiar with already. So we'd love to continue. Oh, wait a minute. Pause here and see if there are any. Well, actually, I'll transition over to this point and then got some questions here. So we have our contact information here. And then this is also in, I think, the resource guide that Kate sent out. But want to continue to answer questions. Another space we would love to get some information from you all. And we're happy to answer questions on what we talked about, continue to answer questions about our office. But another space that we'd love to have a little bit more information is just to hear from you all on better ways that our office can support all of you. We are in, have you experienced discrimination in housing? What were the resources that you were able to access? What was helpful? If you've engaged with our office, as some people have shared already, what went well, what didn't? We just want to open up the floor to both answer your questions and also just hear from you if there's any information that you'd like to share with us on how we can most effectively support all of you as you are living in the city and dealing with housing issues. So I'm going to stop this screen share and then go check in the chat to see if there was anything. But if anyone would also like to raise their hand or share anything, happy to answer questions as well.
Yeah, did a bit of a scan of the chat there while you were going over the resources, Ryan. Looks like there's some questions about the relationship between SOCR and SDCI and renting in Seattle. SDCI and the Office for Civil Rights did collaborate on the development of renting in Seattle and the technical pieces that are explained in renting in Seattle, whether that's in the handbook or in the videos that are online. But that is put out by Department for Construction and Inspection. So that's sort of a joint effort on putting that out there as a resource for people. Yep, and I see a link to the Renting in Seattle handbook there, which landlords are supposed to give everybody the handbook every year. I think that a lot of people are surprised to find that out. I know I was, because I've been here 9 years, never seen it. So we have a ways to go with those kinds of things, and hopefully that collaboration with SDCI will get the word out more and more and more. And then a question about, is the Economic Displacement Relocation Assistance Program still around? Yes, and that is an SDCI administered program.
Yeah, Roxy.
Yes, hello, and thank you for having this meeting. I have a couple questions. First up is that where would we go to report potential scam landlords? I'm looking for a new place, and what I see on Craigslist, deals that are too good to be true. They sound really good, and I, follow them up just in case, they are real, but I don't have high hopes. But it then becomes obvious, one of their tactics that I've seen is that they get you to try out, get you to pay for a credit and background check up front. And then they say oh, we'll refund the money after you meet us. I'm fairly out of the game of trying to find new apartments. I've been in the same place for the last 8 years, and I found it very easily. So I haven't really had to deal with a lot of this currently. So any tips or tricks to just as far as what is the natural course of progression for getting contacting a landlord, potential landlord, and then trying to get a new apartment. I'm sure most places allow you to view first before like they ask about like your credit or background check or anything like that. So like that should be a big red flag, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So great question about where to report scam landlords. I'm not 100% certain on that, and I will we'll look into that, and then
We'll
we'll
just-
get response
Well,
find an answer. Unless Andrea, do you know? Would it be?
I think we need to confirm and get back to them, but my understanding is that may be the Consumer Protection Division, possibly the Attorney General. Yeah, we'll have to confirm if there is something more internal to the city for that.
But as for like what the process is, so one of the first things that you want to always be looking for when you're starting to look for places is that all landlords are required to provide all of the screening criteria for the apartment at the very beginning of the process. So before they should ask anything of you, before they ask for a credit check, before they ask for any of those things, even honestly, like before you do a viewing, you should be able to find all of the criteria that they're going to use to determine who they're going to rent to. And this is a part of the first in time law, that they are required to post all of the screening criteria. So it'll say if they're going to do a credit check, it's going to say how much of your rental history they're going to look at. It's going to say if they have an income requirement, that you have to have like an income that's 3 times over the rent or something along those lines. So when you're out and you're looking for housing, the first thing to look for is for that list of screening criteria, because if they don't have that, then they're not in compliance with the first in time housing law. And also that'll let you know ahead of time what all these different steps are going to be. Now that could include the credit check, but that it'll tell you that that's going to be a part of the process, and you will do that usually after you've completed an application, right? You would complete the application, you turn it in, and then they would do that as a part of their screening criteria. They are allowed, just as a note, they are allowed to require someone that you come and view the apartment as a part of that. So they can have a screening criteria of like, you have to come and you have to view the apartment. But if that's a requirement, then it will be listed on those screening criteria.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Kate. Probably
So I guess I have a question about that, because I'm in every single neighborhood Facebook group that I could get in, so I can promote Be Seattle events when we are in the neighborhood. Because we used to do a lot of renters' rights trainings in person. We do less now because of COVID, but I joined all of them beforehand. And what I see constantly is landlords posting that they have a unit for rent and just asking for people to DM them. And so there is no information about like the applicant criteria. And I rent from a small landlord, and they didn't really have any criteria. Like they definitely rented to us based on, I think, vibes, which, you know, leads to discriminatory practices.
Right.
So what can renters do in that situation when they are looking for a place and they keep seeing all of these like DM me for the details?
I would say, yeah, great question. I would say if you want to know, like the first message could be like, what is the screening criteria? And they should be able to provide those. Now, what it's supposed to be is that when they do a posting about it, that they have the screening criteria listed. A lot of, and you noted exactly, it's a lot of the smaller landlords that are not necessarily aware of all of these policies. And so oftentimes our first step is to just inform them of what the requirements are and give them that opportunity to comply. So I would encourage like you as well, send them, like if you're going to DM them, then the first question can be, what are the screening criteria? Like what's the criteria we're looking at? And that should include, everything that you're going to need to know what they're looking for. That also is what you should look at the top of it should be listed also at the top of your application. So if you get to that point as well, that's another place that you should be double checking that those are there. If they refuse to give you those screening criteria, then you can reach out to SDCI. Yeah.
I guess my concerns around that are that they can make up whatever criteria they want based on what they see on your social media profile. And I guess maybe a good answer for that. But you know, if your profile shows that you have a family or you are a person of color, like that inherently they can say, well, we require, you know, a credit score of 800. But you know, if you're somebody that looks like what they have in mind, what they want to rent to, suddenly that's not a requirement and there's no real way to tell the difference.
Yeah, and that's why the law is written that there's when they're doing a posting, they're supposed to post it all there so that it is determined ahead of time before they meet any renters, before they see any of your information, that all of that information is there predetermined before they're doing viewings, before they're accepting applications, so that they can't modify it on the back end for those specific reasons. So that is why postings are supposed to include all of that screening criteria from the beginning.
So, and I just want to say something that a landlord said in the small landlord stakeholder group that was held a couple of years ago when they were complaining about first in time ordinance. They said, well, you know, it's an $11,000 fine if you get caught for violating first in time. And that's just not true. And I feel like that is what landlords are putting out there. And I think maybe like people believe them when they say things like that, but also like, let's be honest here, there isn't really like a punishment involved if you violate most of our laws, unless it's like continuously when it comes to landlord laws. And I also saw in the comments, Troy was asking for legal action, intimidating behaviors, illegal arrests, and blatant racism. And there should be a level of accountability where landlords are, when they're causing this harm, that, you know, they're brought to court and they're fined. And that's just not how the system is set up. That's not how most of our like legal aid is set up. They can help with like very like clear cut, this is the law and this is what you did, and they can bring that to SOCR. They can help, and I know SOCR can like pursue these like very clear, like this is the law and this is how you violated it things. But these like looser areas and intimidating behaviors and like illegal arrests, that's really hard to prove. The system is like stacked against renters in that way. And before I hand the mic back to Ryan and Andrea, I also want to note that part of the work that the Seattle Renter Organizing Council has been doing is to eventually get the city of Seattle to have a separate office of rental housing standards that would be able to provide robust enforcement of tenant protections. And that would be issuing fines and penalties for violating the existing laws, and not having to bring them to the city attorney, who has to then determine whether or not it's worth bringing to court and ultimately have a judge decide whether or not this is fine worthy. SOCR could go in and say, yes, this is a violation of our first in time ordinance. Here's your ticket, which is exactly what the landlords are saying is already happening. But that's not how it works.
Yeah. It's a very nuanced kind of scenario, right? So the investigation process itself within the enforcement division, once a person has gone all the way through the investigation process, there's a damages assessment, and those penalties are laid out in the law, right? And there are caps on them, and oftentimes the kinds of numbers of dollars of the penalties don't really have a huge impact on the landlords, most of them, because the landlords are large. And so how much meat is there to that? There's also a conciliation process that comes into play after an investigation before the city attorney takes it up. And so kind of what we're seeing all along the process is all the opportunities to try and either, figure out if it was a misunderstanding. And if it wasn't, we're going to do the investigation. And if the investigation goes in favor of the tenant and those rights were violated, then there's a process for determining what those damages are. And there's a lot of opportunity for them to, for the, responding party to, push back on that. And so, yeah, organizations like yours articulating other ways to have more meat to the consequences of violating someone's rights, I think is an important conversation, because there are limits in the law. No matter what area of law we're talking about, there are limits to the law. And that's one of the things that's difficult about working in civil rights and discrimination complaints, is because the law is not a perfect answer for the actual problems that people are having, for the actual harm that's being done. And so, there are some schools of thought that say that the director's charge is one way to have more impact. And so we rely on, the public at large and people that are really engaged in trying to make change in this space, to bring what they have as an experience, see if that can be set out as a complaint, and route them to the appropriate, or at least most available path that they have to try and advocate for those rights and get an outcome. But there is oftentimes some disappointment with that, because because it's that unequal space, right? It's unequal power.
Can you speak more to the reconciliation process? Because that is something that's unique to SOCR. And I know that SDCI doesn't really have that. And they also don't have a lot of the penalties for a code violation as clearly spelled out. And that their goal is voluntary compliance. So for the landlord to fix it. So in my opinion, there's an advantage here with SOCR having that reconciliation process.
Well, I think that here's my understanding of it, right? Here's where I see the value in it, as far as having us placed within the enforcement division as opposed to somewhere else, or as opposed to SDCI. So, and if by the reconciliation process, do you mean there are a number of opportunities to try and resolve this without going all the way through the investigation, that's one way to reconcile the issues. Another way is to use the investigation process and potentially still settle something, if people choose to. So the process for reconciliation early on within the enforcement division is, if you haven't been able to work it out already and you still have a complaint, and that complaint is within our jurisdiction, you have the opportunity as the person bringing the charge to ask the responding party, usually a landlord. We do the bulk of our work within the landlord-tenant space, also in the employment space, to see if they're willing to work it out. What's available to people in a reconciliation process, first of all, it's voluntary and both people have to consent, right? Is they put their own value on the harm that's occurred. So you can exceed what might be available as damages as a result of an investigation, if that's what everybody agrees to. And that's within the control of the charging party to determine if the terms that they've been discussing with the person or the business that has done them harm, if that works for them. And if it doesn't, you don't have to continue in that process, and you still have the investigation available to you, the more legal, formal process. And as a result of the investigation, the amount of damages that would be awarded are set out by law, as opposed to being something that's negotiable and up to the individuals to decide on. So you can also, come up, oftentimes people come to mediation because their experience has been such that they feel like it's faster, sort of better for whatever reason to them, than to try and work that out without the strictures of the legal process than it is to have to go all the way through an investigation that may take 6 months to a year, sometimes more than a year, to see the end. And so, you know, everyone's different in their want and will and reasons for trying to resolve things aside or differently than they would in the legal process. Because sometimes they can get more of what they actually need. You know, maybe it is requiring training for the entire property management company. You know, maybe it is, you know, X dollars, right, to compensate them, not just for the fact that there was a violation of their rights, but there was real consequences. You know, they lost the apartment, they didn't have anywhere to go, it was massively stressful, it had all of these other kinds of consequences. So those are the kinds of things that can be discussed and resolved to people's desire in the mediation process that doesn't come out in an investigation settlement process quite the same. So people value the things themselves when they go through mediation as opposed to being subject to what the law allows as part of damages in an investigation. Or even if they have to go on to appeal and the city attorney takes it up and all that. Yeah, so that being said, I think it's important for people to know that part of our reconciliation processes, well, all of it really hinges on people making their own choices. And there are oftentimes the types of disputes that come through our office, discrimination complaints of every stripe, that what they really are after and really feel is right for them is to seek that public declaration of wrongdoing and damages being assessed, and that being known as a matter of record. Okay? And that's 100% what people should do if that's the kind of outcome that they want. And so there's never any time where a person is forced to go through some kind of conciliation process. And we early on identify whether or not people have a desire to work this out differently, or if what they really want is something that stands against the system as a matter of record. So there's a lot of options there. And so the conciliation process is kind of a full spectrum, think of it that way. Right, everything from an early intervention based on a misunderstanding all the way up to forget about it. It might have even just been a misunderstanding, but I still want there to be consequences, right, for this person that violated my right, and I want the whole city to have a record of it. You know, because a lot of times people just want to know that what they've been through isn't going to happen to someone else, and that legal consequences might have the force and ability to make that possible. So we have to respect that within the processes that we offer to people, and we do.
So just to reinforce a point, and then I want to pass it to Roxy because they have their hand up.
Yeah, I see that too.
Yeah. So with the entire investigation process, it'll all come down to the evidence that the investigators can find, which is, I just want to reinforce Andrea's earlier point about those records. Taking records of the conversations you have, taking records of the communications, keeping your emails, all of these things. If there are issues going on, make sure that you have records of all of it. Because if an investigation starts, what the investigator is going to ask for is, please present your evidence of what is happening. And having those communications, having those records, even if it's just a written log of like, I talked to my landlord this day and we talked about such and such. Those are the key pieces of information that they're going to need in those investigations. So keeping good records is both a way to protect yourself, and it's also a way to just stay organized and to know what is going on. Okay, passing it to Roxy, who's had their hand up.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for switching subjects again, but going back to like trying to suss out a scam, what is like the best way to say like, hey, can I get your verification of identity or something like that? Like, and at what like step of the process, is best for that? Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan. No, me? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I think here it's screenshots of your friend, you know, what have they said? Collect that information without revealing anything that's anything too personal about you would be an approach at the very least. And then contacting the Office for Civil Rights and going through the intake process might be a way to find out really who their identity is. Because if you bring an inquiry with our office, we have to go through a whole process of identifying who these people are. You know, so that might be some protection there.
I think
Yeah, I think we're
the
gonna have to
rental,
circle back with some more detail probably on where to report that, other ways to protect oneself against scams.
yeah, putting the caveat that like this is SDCI's world,
Yeah.
but we can share what we know. All rental properties are required to be registered. So if they're putting up you know, a post and they're saying that they are, you know, a landlord and this is a rental property, they are required to have that registered with the city. I'm not 100% certain how easy it is to search that, but we can get back to you on that.
Okay, but you could just
Yeah.
like politely ask, hey, like, what is your listing for this rental property for the city or something like that?
Yes, I think it's very, very in line with just sort of how do you suss out whether anything is legitimate or not? Yes, just ask, can you give me a listing of your property? What is the address for the property? Where's a picture of the property? You know, what are your listing criteria? Get really familiar with that first in time ordinance. And you can use that as a basis for asking your questions. What are the screening criteria? When are you touring? You know, things along those lines might at least give you some
Ooh.
upfront information about whether you want to pursue it.
Okay.
I feel like Tanea knows more than we do. Tanea said that you can filter the registry by address. So that would probably be like you can, that might be a good way to go about. Just go on to the registry website, search the address that they give you, and you should be able to check if that's a legit listing. I mean, it could still be someone who's just using a listing that's there and still trying to scam you in some ways, but at least that gives you some level of knowing that like that's a rental property that exists in the city.
Okay.
We may have an opportunity to talk with our testing department or testing program directors too, to see if they have any additional information that might be helpful for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, scanning through to see if there's anything else in the chat.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the chat, there's actually a really good question that I think often happens with regards to landlords saying, well, I'll give you this, but I'm not going to do this. Jennifer says, is it ever okay for us to have to give up other rights in order to get a right honored or enforced? Like, can we be told we will get a small bit of rights, relocation assistance, for example, but we cannot get reasonable accommodations or housing codes enforced?
Do you mean by a landlord making those kinds of claims? You can only do this, but you can't do that, coming from a landlord?
Right, or if you ask for an accommodation and the landlord says, well, I'll do this, but I'm not, you know, because I'm doing this, I'm not going to be able to do that.
So I'll say it's if it's rights that you like, I'd say that the broad answer is no. You should never. Landlords cannot leverage one of your rights to like renege on another one of your rights. That is not okay. Where it gets a little bit and this is I'll say that with the clarification that when it comes to accommodation law, going back to this idea of it's a conversation. So when you make an accommodation request, it doesn't necessarily mean that like the exact accommodation that you request is going to end up being where you land. So if for example, you say, I need this modification of a policy, and the landlord comes back and says, well, can we do something like this? It is a dialogue. The right is that it's an accommodation that can work for you. So you don't need to sacrifice that it's something that is going to end up meeting your needs, but it might not be the exact criteria or the exact thing that you ask for. If they offer like other ways to do it that are still going to meet your needs, then that's where it can get a little bit squishy. And that's not about necessarily not having your rights met. There needs to be an accommodation for your needs. It's what that exactly looks like has to be a dialogue back and forth. And there is a part of that process, which is a checking in. So if you land on something and you try it and you find that it's not actually meeting your needs, then that starts the dialogue back over again. And if they're refusing to engage at that point, then that would be a violation of your rights and you could come to our office. So again, like that's one space where it gets a little bit squishy. And I would say it's never about, you never have to pass on any of your rights or limit one of your rights. It's just understanding that when it comes to accommodations in particular, it is a dialogue, and it's about finding something that works for both parties. So it's not always it's not always like the first thing that you request. It might be a slightly modified version of that, as long as it can work for you and it's meeting your needs.
It's not uncommon to see an overlap of people articulating different ways in which they've been discriminated against in the same kind of transaction. And that's why an intake process with our office is really thorough. It's walk through each circumstance that you went through to determine whether or not there's a recognizable charge to make about it. So you can have multiple incidences built into one charge based on which rights, whether it's like retaliation, discrimination, different treatment, violation of first in time, all three parts of first in time, those all might be wrapped up into a single charge. And so at least insofar as an enforcement perspective, we, I think, have somehow anticipated that when people have a situation where their rights are being violated, that it is nuanced, complex, and not just a you only fit into this box kind of scenario. And so our intake specialist walks people through the whole of what happened so that they can make a determination on what's enforceable and what might be enforceable somewhere else or doesn't rise to the level of discrimination claim.
Yeah. And to reinforce what Jennifer is saying, they're saying, if the doctor explains that it won't meet their needs, then yeah, that's not
keep going.
That isn't an accommodation. Like that's not meeting your needs. That is not where the process should end. You have to keep it, it has to be a continuous process until you land on something that is going to meet the needs of your disability. Ooh, Troy had the question, what's the intake process for the director's charge?
I would say the intake process for the director's charge is the same as the intake process for any individual charge as well. Only it's sort of assessed at a higher level because ultimately it's the director himself that would gather all of the information about the various violations or potential violations and make the decision whether to pursue it as a director charge instead of an individual one. So you would still contact our office and start there.
Yep. Kate asked if multiple tenants are having issues related to retaliation, discrimination, and denying reasonable accommodations or modifications. Do they all file complaints individually? They can reach out collectively and say we're all having these similar issues, and they can do an. Trying to think. I think our intake specialist recently was just doing an intake that had multiple people that were on the same case. So it would depend on the exact situation, what the intake process will look like. But in terms of if they want to reach out and say all of us are experiencing this thing, they can do that collectively, and then our office will work with them to figure out how to do the intake from there. But yeah, you can, if everyone's facing the same issues, then they can reach out as a group to our office.
So follow-up question to that, would the best way to do that be through like the like sending an email versus like filling out the form online or calling?
All three of those are going to go to the same exact place. So you can use whichever is most convenient for you. There will be, and then what'll happen. So to give just a brief overview of the process, when you call our office or send out that form or do anything like that, our front desk person will reach out to you. They'll do a very initial screening, which are just the basic questions to make sure that like the incident took place within Seattle and it's related to laws that we enforce. Or it potentially is related to laws that we enforce. So that's kind of that first just initial screen, very basic. That's where people often come with complaints that go to other offices, and we kind of send them to the appropriate office from there. From there, you'll get scheduled for an intake interview with our intake specialist, and that will be where you kind of walk through exactly what happened. They will ask you particular questions, and they will use that. So it'll be a more in-depth examination of like, do we think that this is the type of charge that lies within the laws that we enforce, and that there's a potential that this is a discrimination. From that intake interview, it'll be determined if we can move forward with an investigation. If we can, then they will write up what are called the formal charges. So that's when they'll put up, they'll write out exactly what the charge is and what laws we think might be violated, and get that all together. Then the people who bring the complaint will sign those charges, and that is what will start the investigation. So then those charges go to one of our investigators, and the investigators act as a neutral third-party fact finder, which is again why having all of those records is so important. And so they will connect and gather all of the evidence from you. They will also reach out to, in this case, if it's a landlord issue, to your landlord and collect evidence from them. And then based on weighing those evidence and comparing it to the law, they will make the assessment on if a law has been violated. So that gives you kind of an overview of what the process will look like.
Thank you. I actually had a kind of loosely tied question to that. Does the Office for Civil Rights investigate all cases of retaliation or just retaliation against protected classes?
Well, we would only have jurisdiction over protected classes.
So as a follow-up, if like a building were to try to hold a tenants association meeting and the landlord found out and closed the community room, where would they file a complaint?
Good question. I want to say at the SDCI, but
too.
let me add that to our questions.
Let's add that to our questions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If the basis for closing the community room was race-based, right, or any of the other protected classes, if there was a connection there, then that's a discrimination claim. And then retaliation is an investigatable discrimination claim. But if it's bad behavior on the part of the landlord that caused them to close the community room, or they just, are resisting the organizing of the tenants, and that's why they closed the community room, that's kind of a different scenario. So that's what we'll have to look into a little bit deeper.
Jennifer asked, during the screening, do intake specialists have the right to ask very personal questions about your disability? No, they don't. And at no point during the process will anyone ask you what your disability is. The only thing that might potentially come up is if you required an accommodation, they might ask for the same sort of proof that your landlord might ask for, which is like not listing what your disability is, but just a note noting that like you do need an accommodation. And so that is the only piece of evidence that they're, and that won't happen until you get all the way to like you've signed the formal charges and are like an investigator is looking into stuff. Our intake specialist and our phone screener are not going to ask you for any of that, and no one in the entire process is allowed to ask you what your disability is.
Now, you may have to furnish documentation related to the accommodation that you're asking for that fell apart. That might happen, but that's a different issue.
Trash
I think
goblin.
it's a different issue. Oh, trash goblin.
Yes, I am the trash goblin. I'm like a down bad poor, okay? And I can't help but notice that like poverty intersects with other kinds of social marginalization. And I know that poverty is not a protected class by any means, even though there is this intersection. And that being said, to what extent can the Office of Civil Rights deal with the fact that this intersection exists? Even if like maybe somebody isn't exactly being discriminated against because like they're LGBTQ or because they're Black or whatever, but their poverty makes their marginalization and the consequences of losing housing that much more monumental, you know. And that's my question number one. Question number two, even the resources that exist for like low income people who can't get Section 8 vouchers, which are incredibly hard to get, are very lackluster. A lot of even like nonprofits for low income people have absurd criteria for credit scores. And if you have medical debt or you have student debt, you know, like I do, I'm not going to have a 700 credit score. I mean, I'm going to be in the upper 500s at best. And so I don't want to live in a van because that's going to be towed and I'm going to lose everything. So like and the fact is, like, for instance, marginalized people are more likely to have lower credit scores because they just simply don't have access to good jobs and money that more that and intergenerational wealth that more privileged groups do. So I guess that's an example where that intersection between like poverty or downward mobility and other protected classes exists. And how can the Office of Civil Rights can take into account that intersection more effectively? That's the question, basically.
Not necessarily to answer a great question with a question, but that is the kind of thing that we want to hear from you all about, what it is that how can we better assist, meet those intersectional needs in the way that either the enforcement code is written or the services performed. We do have so many protected classes, and we have definitely continually seen how these things all relate over and over and overlap in the types of charges that we investigate. So wherever there is a connection between one protected class and another protected class came into play in a disagreement or situation or circumstance that led a person to make a complaint to the Office for Civil Rights, all of those bases for the charge are investigated, included, inquired about. How do we really solve the problems? That is an ongoing effort. How do we really answer the issues of intersectionality and take a holistic approach to enforcement? That is an ongoing endeavor. And it's one of the things that we were hoping to have some conversation about with y'all tonight. What are the kinds of things that you would like to see the Office for Civil Rights do so that we can meet more of the needs for the communities that you live in? Because enforcement is only one way for us to help. That's one of the reasons why, the mediation program came into existence anyway, is because community told us that they wanted ways to try and solve problems with their landlord, their employers, or otherwise, without having it rise to the level of a legal complaint. you know, and try and get in there earlier before it becomes this, bigger kind of problem without interfering with people's rights to articulate and enforce their rights through a more formal process. So I guess that's a way of saying I would love to explore the answer with you. How do we manage the intersectionality, particularly when it comes to low income and all the various programs that, like you say, are lackluster? How can we help in that effort to change those things?
And just to real quick, others have noted there are some protections that can sometimes come into effect that help. So source of income is one of them, although source of income isn't amount of income, it's just where the income is coming from. There can still be requirements that you have a certain amount of income, and that's how our current landlord tenant laws are written. Now, if you're getting a subsidy, there is a couple of things to, one, there is protection for, Section 8 vouchers. So you can't be discriminated against because you have one of those vouchers. But as you noted, less than a quarter of people who are eligible for Section 8 vouchers actually have Section 8 vouchers. And one could make a lot of arguments that all we're doing is subsidizing landlords because we're giving money to people that then give to landlords. That's its own, yeah. Someone noted that caste discrimination is our newest protected class, and that's true, but caste and class do not intersect by the definitions that we use. Caste has a very specific context and so it doesn't include class discrimination. So as you noted, Trash Goblin, there is no class or income level is not a protected class. So one way that could be shifted would be mobilizing to change the law so that it was, and then that could be then that would be something that the office could look into, because our constraints around investigations are based on what the ordinances and the laws are. And so we can come out and we can engage and we can help people to advocate for the rights that they have, but our office can only enforce the laws that exist on the books currently. And we do have a policy wing that looks into how we can expand civil right protections. So that is something that we can, we can pass along what the experiences are of people in the city to them, and they can think about and craft, what ordinances might look like that would create more protections. But then it comes down to the city council decides whether or not they're going to pick that up and pass those laws. So not a particularly satisfying answer, I think. But I want to give you the reality of what our office can and can't do. And we are constrained as an executive branch by what the current laws are. And so source of income and Section 8 are kind of the what's available when it comes to income. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jade, did you still have a question? And then I'll pass it back to
I'll capture some things
to wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you. I was just I put my hand down real quick because of time, but I just want to say I hope that this kind of conversation, this way of thinking, really does continue, because to your point, there's a lot of red tape that y'all have to deal with. But this is where collaborations, this is why I mentioned a cohort in the chat. There are a lot of this is new, right? Especially with right to counsel for tenants. And then of course the source of income discrimination. But there's loopholes, there's arguments, there's logic to apply. And I think it would be really cool for Seattle Office of Civil Rights to apply the same logic in their intake. I mean, I know y'all can only uphold the laws that are on the book, but that book is constantly being updated and rewritten or whatever, in the appeals courts, etc. And so if there's that conversation happening, that collaborating happening between the folks actively working on those arguments, I think that could really be helpful to start actually addressing these intersections that are very real. Because the law, it only goes so far, but just the y'all acknowledge the fact that landlords use loopholes all the time, and there's loopholes there for community too, for the people too, for renters too. We just gotta use them. Anyway, I think.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate that. Well, I kind of in the spirit of this conversation, I think I'll leave you with this. What I heard you say, at least some of the things that I heard you say, were things that we were hoping to find out. One of those is that you're hoping that the Office for Civil Rights can help you advocate for an improvement in the conditions and the treatment for tenants across the board, and that those loopholes be identified and closed sooner rather than later, that there be an opportunity for collective action, and that the Office for Civil Rights finds a way, hopefully within the laws, or a change in laws to take more community concerns and be able to act on those instead of it always having to be an individual type of a complaint that we handle. And these are big, far-reaching things. Yeah, I've seen a lot of comments in the chat, and also tried to take in a lot of the great comments and feedback that you gave us as best I can for the time of the evening. So if I flub it a little bit, I'll flub it a little bit. But we are hopeful, as you are, I think, in that there is an ongoing conversation about how we can really get to what the community needs are and be creative about the processes we can put in place to help you handle them. This is a long road, and we also, I think, have an opportunity, right, to continue to share information about what we do, what those processes are, and how you engage with it on an ongoing basis, so you can share that information out with your community too. And this is just a start to that process. So those are some of the things that I heard that we can take back as feedback from all of you who are living this problem day to day and trying to make change for tenants across Seattle. And if we have a role in helping you be heard and make some changes, that's what we're here for. And at 7:59, I will say, Kate, over to you.
Did Kate freeze? There you are, Kate.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Sorry, I did freeze. Thank you so much to Andrea and Ryan. This was so helpful, and I know that there were some challenging questions, but we deeply appreciate you coming here and trying to answer these like really complicated questions that don't have a clear answer often. And so thank you for sharing with us and also for listening to us. And I will send you a follow-up email with some of the questions that came up that we couldn't answer collectively. And with that, I'm asking if folks can hang on just for another like minute or two to cover our action for tonight, because we always end every workshop with an action that people can take. Oh no, am I frozen again?
A little bit.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Well, we look forward to your questions.
My
We'll
internet
follow up. Yeah, we look forward to your
Awesome.
questions. All right. I'm going to bid you good evening, and thank you again so much for spending this time with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right.
And for the renters who are still here, we actually have a few actions that you can take tonight. So we've been talking a lot about what's happening now and like our situations and how the Office for Civil Rights can help us. But when we look to the future as to like what we want for the city of Seattle, it's looking kind of bleak in my opinion. So the draft of the transportation levy was just released, and it's incredibly car focused at the rate at which They are proposing that we build sidewalks. Seattle won't be fully accessible with sidewalks for 400 years. And there's not deep investments in public transportation. So this leads to a lack of access around the city in general. So transportation advocates have put together oh, something is happening on my screen. A toolkit to help folks advocate for a stronger transportation levy. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, there is an email that you can send to the mayor, and then there's a questionnaire that they're asking for folks to give feedback on the proposed levy. And the connected communities, I think it was, sorry, I'm out of my notes. Let me see if I can hop back in there. Sorry, it was disability mobility initiative put together like a kind of like a guide on how to perhaps respond to the questions in the feedback survey. And that needs to be done by Friday, April 26th, if you want to give feedback on the transportation levy. And the other thing that's coming up is the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is supposed to be a roadmap for Seattle's future. And when I look at it as a renter, as a housing justice advocate, I think it's setting us up to just further exacerbate our existing housing and homelessness crisis. It doesn't really build enough housing for the expected income of people into Seattle in the next 10 years. It doesn't allow for social housing, permanently affordable social housing. There is a lack of upzoning in neighborhoods that already have transportation and resources. And the areas that are being upzoned are around major roadway arterials. So when you tie this to the transportation plan, it's just causing congestion and pollution. And we are all still going to be fighting for affordable housing units because there is not going to be enough housing for all of us. So either we're going to have to move out of the city and drive in and really just continue to clog up these roadways, or we need to build enough housing for all of us. The other thing that is really notable is that the executive's office took out a lot of the original suggestions around tenant protections, because part of preventing displacement is, as we know, through robust tenant protections. And it really only kind of cemented in a few of our existing protections, which we all know is not enough. We can walk outside of our house and we see our unhoused neighbors. They're everywhere. We're all one emergency away from being in the same situation. Some of us are in that same situation. And so we know that tenant protections can help to keep us housed, and they have to be included in the comp plan. With that, the feedback needs to be given by May 6th. There are a few open houses where you can just go talk to people. But also the Complete Communities Coalition put together a little toolkit to help you maybe draft a comment or to even just understand the comp plan, because it feels really intimidating if you're not like a policy wonk, basically. Like if you're just a regular person, and I will get into your comment in a moment, Jennifer. Let me finish with this. If you're just a regular person trying to navigate this, it's hard to see where your opinion matters. But that's actually what they're seeking. They want to hear what like just the average renter thinks about their plans for the future. And do you think that this is adequate? Do you think that this is going to be enough to protect you and to protect your neighbors and your family? And the other thing that is really cool is the Share the Cities Organizing Collective put together this like Mad Libs style like comment drafting thing that you basically go through and just click on like what you think are the priorities, and it puts together a comment for you that you can change and tweak in whatever way you want. And so it makes it really easy and accessible to give feedback on the comprehensive plan, because our voices are really important. And if we want to have the opportunity to stay in the city, like now is the time to put it forward, because this is going to shape the city for the next 20 years, really. Like they can reevaluate it at 10, but so that means even if leadership changes entirely in the next decade, they take a sharp swing towards housing justice, like they still are following the comp plan as the roadmap. And so regardless of who is in power at the time, we want the strongest comp plan possible. And so in the comments, I'm seeing permanent affordable housing is a slippery slope. If it's permanent, it must be adequate. This is not about a housing project. This is about social housing. It is different. It is not a slum. It's mixed income from 0 to 120%. You can look to the social housing in Vienna, or my gosh, I forgot the other city that's like really known for it. Sorry, space is getting late. But this is not about project-based subsidies. This is not housing choice vouchers. Social housing is an entirely different model of housing that seeks to house people in housing that they have power over, and that moves with them through life. So you know, if your income changes, if your family grows, that you still have a place within social housing. And something important to note about the social housing board as they are growing is that it is right now it's majority, I think most people are renters, but once it's established, once we've started building social housing, it's going to be majority tenants who are actually living in the social housing, to have a say in how it operates and the needs of the community. Gosh, there's a lot of questions. This is not Europe, this is Seattle. That's right, and Seattle sucks. Seattle has a homelessness crisis. We see it everywhere. If they can do it, why can't we? Who funds the social housing? That's a good question. Right now there's Initiative 137 that is seeking to get progressive revenue to fund social housing, and that would be a payroll tax on people, on companies that have, trying to explain this adequately and I'm getting tired, so sorry about it. But basically, like if an employee receives over $1 million through work, through their compensation package, it would be a payroll tax on those compensation packages. So we are talking the richest of rich people. I cannot imagine getting $1 million or more per year from my employer. But if I did, I would certainly want to be taxed like hell to pay for social housing, because that's how you build a community. And it's an entirely different, oh gosh, there's lots of questions in here. So I'm gonna send you to houseourneighbors.org. I will put it in the chat. They can explain a lot more about social housing and progressive revenue than I can in this tiny space. And I don't want to take too much of people's times. And this, you know, social housing, like I said, it's missing from the comp plan entirely, but it's coming. Like we're figuring it out together. Oh, and Tanya just put another link in the chat, probably a more clear one that said it's let's build socialhousing.org, that will also explain more. And so with that, please give feedback on all of this. This is where you can really like use your voice as just a renter and a person who exists. The city wouldn't own your housing. The social housing, the PDA, it's a public developer. So there are risks with any public developer. Like certainly nothing is going to be perfect, but like I said, that there is a massive there's a majority of people who live in the housing will be on the board for the PDA. Whereas Community Roots Housing, as I see in the comment, is also a PDA. They have one tenant on their board of directors. They don't have a majority tenants on their board. So there is a difference there, and there's also with the mixed incomes going to be but like a flexible mixed income, permanently affordable, not affordable if you're in this income bracket or this income bracket. It's an entirely different situation. So I encourage you to learn more because we already voted on it. It's coming. We're just figuring out how to fund it, but it's on its way. And frankly, like social housing is probably going to be the key to housing most of us as we age. Okay, and with that, Tanya, will you go to the next slide where we say it's all done? I don't know how this screen got doodled on, but thank you all so much for coming. And thank you for sticking out with us. I know we ran long, so I apologize for that, but I really appreciate all of you for coming, and also for the awesome comments in the chat. Like I wasn't able to respond to all of them, but I was reading them and I was like, yes. And this is how we build tenant power with this mindset and these ideas. And anyway, I'm gonna end it there.